Perek Vov, Mishnah Ches. Hakitea yoytze bekav sheloi. Hakitea is a person who's got a leg which unfortunately has been amputated. So the bottom of his foot has been cut off, has been amputated, and he uses a kav. A kav is a false wooden foot. So, Hakitea yoytze bekav sheloi divi Reb Meir. Reb Meir allows him to go out with this false wooden foot on Shabbos. Because it's like a wooden shoe which has got a cavity which is hollowed out, and he puts the stump of his foot, which is his amputated foot, has got a stump at the end of his natural foot, and that goes into this kav, that goes into the clog, this sort of shoe, and Reb Meir allows him to go out with it on Shabbos because it's considered like his shoe, is considered like min alayim. Minal Didehu is considered his shoe. The Rabbi Yosi does not allow the amputee to go out with this kav on Shabbos, and two possible reasons. Number one, that he's not really using it as a shoe, rather because really he's getting around using crutches on Shabbos, which incidentally he's allowed to wear on Shabbos because it's considered essential for him. He can't get around without them. But he cannot go out with a shoe according to Rabbi Yosi, because the shoe is not really considered his min alayim. He's just using it to make himself more presentable, that he feels more comfortable going out in public wearing this artificial foot, and therefore he's not considered min alayim, and therefore it's considered a masui. Alternatively, Taisa says that we're worried that this kav may fall off, this wooden shoe might fall off, and therefore you might come to carry it. So either way, that's the machlokus of Meir Rabbi Yosi, whether or not a kitea, an amputee, is allowed to go out with a kav shelo, with this wooden foot, on Shabbos or not. Continues the Mishnah. V'im yesh lo beis kibel ketutim tome. If this kav, this wooden shoe, has got a beis kibel which contains a sort of padding to protect the impact of his stump against the actual kav, against the actual shoe, then it's tomei. Now this is a halacha which discusses the aspects of tumah, and the general rule is that in order for something to become tomei, it's for a keli, at least a wooden keli, to become tomei, the keli has got to have a base kibble, which means some sort of cavity to hold something. Therefore, if this wooden shoe has a cavity, a hollow, and it holds the padding which is there, which is going to protect his the stump of his foot against the shoe, then it's considered a base kibble, and therefore the actual kav, the actual wooden foot, will be makabel tumah. If, however, he puts his stump directly into it, and it doesn't contain any ketutin, then it's considered like a pshute kli'et. Pshute kli'et literally means some sort of flat wooden utensil, and a pshute kli'et is not makabel tumah. Now, even though you could argue that it's sort of carrying his foot, and therefore it is considered a base kibble, it's not really carrying his foot, it's just sort of placing his stump into it. But if it would have ketutin, this padding, then it would be considering carrying the padding, and therefore it would be tomei. Smucha sheloi tmein midras. Smuchas are a form of knee pads. If you imagine the person has lost both ankles down, he's had both legs cut off, both feet cut off from the ankles down, a person used to make, in those days, knee pads, which are paddings from the knee down to the front of the shin, and he would sort of shuffle around, propel himself around on these knee pads. Now, if the zov himself, if the kitea, the amputee himself, this handicapped person himself, was a zov, which is an avatuma, then he would render the knee pads, which he's being supported by, also tomei, because that is the halacha of tumas midras. Midras means he's being supported by these things, and since he's being supported by these knee pads, if he himself was a zov, therefore that would extend that contamination, that tumah, to the knee pads themselves. So therefore the Mishnah says, smucha shaloi tomei in midras. The smuchas, these knee supports, are also tomei midras. The yotzin bohen b'Shabbos, but he is allowed to go out with these on Shabbos. Why? Because everyone agrees that these things are considered his shoes, because he's literally using them as shoes. He's bending down, he's sort of shuffling himself around, using these things as shoes, these knee pads as shoes. V'nichnosin bohen ba'azara, and he's allowed to go into the azara with them. So the Bartenura explains that even though normally afal gav disnan lo yikonis laharabayis b'minalo, even though the halacha is you're not allowed to go into the harabayis with your shoes, hani lav minaninhu lav b'reish raglachim. These knee pads which the person is wearing is shuffling himself around in their way. The pads which go from the knee down to the bottom to the bottom of his foot, sort of the shin area. These things are not really considered minalayim. They're not considered really his shoes, and therefore he would be allowed to go into the azara with them. Continues the Mishnah, the kisei, the smucha shaloi tmein midrus. Now this kisei is sort of the early wheelchair. A person would make this contraption where he would sit on a stool, a low stool, and he would sort of strap his body to that, and he would make sort of two blocks of wood with a handle. So if you imagine the person is going around strapped to this stool, and then with two boxes he is shuffling himself around, sort of propelling himself forward, using these boxes as supports, as items to hold on to and to propel himself forward. So kisei v'smucha shaloi tmei midrus. So again, they are tomei midrus because they're being his body is being supported by these items. If he were to be tomei, then these items would be tomei midrus as well. Ve'in yotzin bohen b'Shabbos, and he cannot go out with them on Shabbos. Why not? Says the Bartenura, the aidi the tolu v'loi ma'argi, since they're not attached properly to him. Zim de mishtalfi v'osilisinu. It could be that they're going to come separated and you might come to carry them. Alternatively, says the Bartenura, since it's possible for them to get around without them, therefore, because he can sort of just shuffle without them rather than use these blocks themselves to propel himself, therefore the blocks themselves become a masui. And and he's not allowed to use this form of wheelchair to go into the azara because they are considered his minalayim, they're properly considered his shoes, and therefore he's not allowed to go into the azara with them. The Mishnah finishes off, ankantamin tahirin. Now what are these ankantamin? The Gemara gives three pshatim what ankantamin is, and the Rishonim debate what exactly the three pshatim are. But Rashi learns the ankantamin, the three pshatim in the Gemara are as follows. The first pshat in the Gemara is a sort of stage horse, a wooden donkey, where imagine like a stage horse where you have a person at the front and a person at the back and this sort of horse which goes over them. That's the first pshat. The second pshat is wooden stilts. Now people would use these wooden stilts to get through a muddy area. Alternatively, they would be used by clowns or jesters, leitzonim, to entertain people. Wooden stilts, that's the second pshat. And the third pshat is, which the Gemara gives, masks, that a person would put on a mask, a scary mask, to frighten children. So you've got three pshatim what this ankantamin means. Either it means the wooden donkey, or it means the stilts, or it means this wooden mask to use to frighten children. Either way, the Mishnah says ankantamin at tahirin. Why are they tahir? Because they're not considered kli tashmish of any use, really, of any real use, and therefore they're not makabel tuma. So the Mishnah says they're tahirin. Ve'ein yotzin bohen, but you're not allowed to go out with them on Shabbos. Why not? Because they're not considered malbush, they're not considered a tachshit in any way, and therefore they're straightforward masui. Therefore, a person cannot go out with this ankantamin on Shabbos. Again, the three pshatim that we said are either they're the wooden horse, that's not a malbush, that's not a tachshit, or they're stilts, again, not a tachshit or a malbush, or a mask is certainly not a tachshit and nor a malbush, and therefore a person cannot go out with them on Shabbos. That is the end of Perek Vav Mishnah Ches.